crazy weather patterns going on right now. I don't know where you would actually like to start.
Well, weather is a good place to start. I mean, that's some down-to-earth, pardon the pun, evidence of that something is definitely wrong with planet Earth. We see it in all sorts of weather phenomena, weather disasters, extreme cases of snow, heavy snow, record-breaking snow, in fact, and record-breaking cold, particularly in the South, which has never, in our memorable history, experienced such cold weather. The South has been devastated because they never have such cold, icy, snowy weather, and the roads. The proof is that they don't have the salt trucks, they don't have the equipment to deal with this as the northern states do, and that's why the South has been particularly devastated. So there's evidence right there of historic, epic snow, cold, ice, etc. That has never occurred before. It's happening closer and closer to the equator. So Earth is in trouble. We look at floods. We've seen entire nations. I know it's easy to forget some of these disasters because they're not really highly publicized in the mass media. But if you look back, you'll recall that the entire nation of Pakistan was flooded out a few years ago. Virtually the entire nation was flooded out. And the entire nation of Australia, the continent, much of that was flooded out just a few years ago. We had floods all over the United States, and I know that people who live in those regions will never forget them. The epic floods in Texas, when Texas was basically floating away. Washington State, Louisville, Kentucky got flooded out very badly several times. Nashville, Grand Ole Opry was damaged heavily. Floods in every portion of the United States, really.
Oh yeah.
Storms, hurricanes that are huge, massive, large area hurricanes like Irene and Sandy. Typically, hurricanes cover a small area.
Look at the Philippines.
Like a bullet.
Look at the Philippines. What was that? 233 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, I mean over 200 miles an hour. I mean that has never been recorded before. So the weather itself is proving that something is wrong with planet Earth because this has never happened before. We could go on and on. We could talk about, as you say, the winds, the drought, record droughts. I mean, I remember, and I followed the Weather Channel quite a bit, homes were so dry that the ground was cracking and the foundations of the houses were being destroyed because the ground was getting so dry, cracking and separating.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. And here we've got, we're about to get hit with an ice storm here in Columbia, South Carolina. So they're putting warnings out about power outages, and so preparing for that.
Right, and this is one reason. We're seeing the reality of it hit home. We're feeling the pain of it. People in the South are going to have to deal with power outages. People up in where I live in New Jersey may very well have power outages due to the ice buildup on the trees and on the power lines. And then the winds, too. So when you have ice buildup and you have winds, that's when power lines come down. And it could be for a long period of time. In fact, the Weather Channel is warning that these power outages may last a long time. So when you feel the pain of it, it's not so easy to dismiss the threat or the reality that Earth is in trouble. It's quite easy to dismiss it when everything is going fine. But when you see the reality of the pain that's hitting us from all these weather disasters, then you begin to realize that, hey, it's time to wake up, time to get in motion, and time to prepare. That's my whole purpose, is trying to get people to prepare. I mean, why would I want to scare people just for the sake of scaring them? People watch horror movies for that reason, to be scared because they enjoy it. But that's not my purpose. That's not our purpose. We want to warn people. We care about people. Care about people protecting their lives and saving their lives. And that's why now they're beginning to realize that, yes, they have to get backup generators. They have to get solar panels. They have to start buying food, canned food. I mean, I've been stocking up, fortunately, before Fukushima's nuclear disaster in Japan, I had stocked up on sardines and salmon. And so that's non-radioactive sardines and salmon, and the dates are still good, still, within the period of freshness where they're not expiring yet. So I was lucky Same thing with, you can get cans of Vienna sausages, and I have a bunch of those in the basement too, and cans of white meat chicken. Well, that's the kind of the protein that people will need when things start going, and mainly it's the power. When the power goes, that's when the stores get cleaned out, and well, everything, our fragile infrastructure, our web-like infrastructure of computers and delivery systems, just-in-time delivery systems, becomes disabled, actually. And nothing can be delivered to the stores. I mean, I was just watching the Weather Channel today. They showed a photograph of these huge long supermarket shelves cleaned out just from this one winter storm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, oh, that's what happens here, is as soon as there's any mention of a snow flurry going to be in the air, and good luck finding bread or milk on any shelf.
Right, so that's why now, when there's no disaster, you've got to start buying dried. What I buy is amaranth. Amaranth is a wonderful grain from Peru, ancient grain from Peru, and that happens to be complete protein. You can get bags of dried amaranth. It's sort of like small beads, and not only amaranth, but there's dried millet and dried barley, dried lentils, dried split peas, very low cost, and those can be soaked for a period of time, and they get softened up without heat, partially softened anyway, so you can save fuel by soaking these grains and legumes in water for 12 or 15 hours. That's the kind of thing we have to start planning for. Plus sprouting seeds. I sprout seeds in a big jar. It's very easy to do. And the sprouts contain all the enzymes that the body needs to break down the foods and to digest them. Our bodies are depleted of enzymes because of our modern day false food that we're eating. So that's why our bodies cannot assimilate the carbohydrates and proteins and fats that we need to in order to keep the body strong and active. So these are all the things we have to start doing.
Yeah, there's so many chemicals that are added to the food. It's ridiculous. I was just talking about this last night with Autumn, and I was telling her, it's like, if you're going to a regular grocery store, practically everything you're getting has got chemicals, preservatives, and all this, processed crap. And and then we wonder why there's such an epidemic with cancers and different diseases. It's all this poison that's being put in the food. So I would suggest people to, get as pure as they can of whatever they're going to store, for sure. I mean, naturally, if you're starving, you're not going to complain that if you have a can of Chef Boyardee. But
right.
So,
but you're right. You go for the basic foods that I've been mentioning, because they have not been tampered with. Grains, dried legumes, and Vienna sausages. I mean, it doesn't come from the best, meat sources, and canned chicken may not be from the best chicken
better
farms.
Than nothing.
At least it's protein that'll keep you going. But you also supplement that with good vegetable protein also that is pure, because it's the basic grains and legumes that haven't been damaged by man's processing.
Wouldn't be a bad idea for people to store seeds as well while they're still natural before Monsanto has all his, everything flipped over.
That's right. You can go to the internet and look for heirloom seeds. Look for that word heirloom, Heirloom seeds. Those are non-GMO, and I keep them in a refrigerator, not in a freezer. I would not freeze seeds, but keeping them sealed real well in a refrigerator is a good thing to do. So there are many things. Of course, even more important than food would be water. Mm-hmm. You cannot survive very long without water. And again, I have stored many empty bottles over the years, plastic bottles. I don't like plastic, but it's the only thing you can get, basically, and that's what you can survive on it. And you can even filter the bottled water that's been sitting in plastic bottles, like for 5, 6, 7 years that I've had, sitting in these plastic bottles stacked up. And you can pour them through a gravity filter, such as a Berkeley ceramic filter, and then pour it through a these countertop carbon filter. So, and even if you drink it out of the bottle, I mean, it's not the best, but it'll keep you alive. So water is extremely important. I would go to the recycling places and start getting bottles from them, because it would take you too long to collect bottles. There may be a disaster looming very soon, so you want to go to a recycling center and see if they'll give you a whole fill up your car, your trunk with empty plastic bottles.
See, and I'll save like the old milk gallons. I don't drink milk myself, but others in the home do. So, I'll save those. I'll wash them out, save them, and put water in them.
That's right. It's a smart thing to do. Well, anyway, so there's a lot to talk about regarding survival. People who live in areas that many people are living in areas that will be flooded out. So think of what you can do. Get a rubber raft. Look
to the craziness we're seeing on this planet and how much of it is off planet.
I've been faced with that question over the past several years as to who's causing or what's causing all this crazy severe weather. Is it man or is it God? And I've come to the conclusion, if you, spiritually speaking, when you pray and you study pray God's scriptures, not just study, because man cannot understand the symbolic mysteries of the Bible. But when you study, you realize that Satan is a real being, and the New World Order absolutely believes that Satan is their God. I mean, this is what they've stated in their books, that the Freemasons, the Illuminati, or the people who rule the world, that they get their power from Satan, who is the temporary ruler of this world. So if they believe that he exists, and the Bible tells us, and Jesus tells us that he does indeed exist, then you can realize that there's a battle going on between God and between Satan. And the men who manage and control the HAARP experiments, instrumentation and weaponry, scalar devices, all those kind of high technology weapons and equipment, those men are tempting, I believe, tend to trigger some of these natural disasters that are already to occur. And the way I analogize it is I often say that these disasters, well, Planet X is like Batman, and man's HAARP disasters are like Robin. So, yeah, man is a minimal, weak trigger for some of the natural disasters that are already developing. Satan wants to take Robin, that Satan wants to take the credit for what Batman is really doing.
Yeah.
What Planet X is doing to this Earth.
And I just wanted to say that, and with some of the higher uppers, when you get up to that top level of control, I mean, these people literally believe that they're going to become God by controlling the people, the weather, everything. Yeah.
Transhumanism, right? That there's a lot of talk about their transhumanist agenda, where they expect to live forever. And of course, this is part of the duel between God and Satan. God tells us that through his sacrifice that we can live forever. And Satan has given us a counterfeit promise that we can live forever through transhumanism. So it's all part of the dual battle between God and Satan. And it's the same thing with these natural disasters. Why would the New World Order want to take credit for all these disasters by giving us reason to believe that it was HAARP that caused this earthquake or that earthquake? Because as long as we the people fear HAARP and the government and the New World Order and the Illuminati, we will remain subservient to them and obedient. But once we realize that it's God bringing in Planet X, then people will fear God and turn their allegiance to God. Satan fears that. Satan hates that. So Satan wants to deceive us with the belief, and we know he is a great deceiver, and his men who rule the world from the pinnacle of the pyramid of power want to trick the world into believing that they have all the power to create these disasters. In fact, I just realized there's a parallel in the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus from the Israelites represent the people who believed, who are true believers. And today, they were just a picture. The Israelites were just a portrait or a representation of the people that God has empowered with faith today. And those people that he has empowered with faith today are spiritual Israel, and they're all over the world. There's some in Nigeria and some in the United States. They don't happen, some of them are Jewish, but many are of all different nationalities, races, and they're a minority, actually, in each race and each nation who believe, been chosen by God to believe in God. And that's what the Israelites of ancient Egypt represented, the future spiritual believers, which are us. Well, in those days, Pharaoh represented, in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh represented Satan, who dominated and enslaved the Israelites. Well, we are similarly, parallelly, being dominated and enslaved by Pharaoh, who is the New World Order, and will become the Antichrist soon. The Antichrist will emerge. And so you see the parallels there. Pharaoh's Egypt had them enslaved, working to build a great empire, the Egyptian empire, and the same thing is happening here. They keep us so busy that we cannot worship God, be devoted to God. In the book of Exodus, God spoke to Moses and told him, tell Pharaoh that I will hammer him with one disaster after another until he lets my people go into the wilderness so that they can worship me and not him. This was God's purpose, and God is doing the same thing right now. So
Yeah.
the book of Revelation is ancient book of Exodus deja vu, all over again.
And what I see is, like when it comes to these control freaks who are at the buttons and switches for us here, I see a bunch of guys who are really men and women, I should say, who are role playing. It's like they want to be that all powerful Antichrist, and it's like they're taking every step necessary to be that. And I'll say this, whether people believe that there's a Satan or not, or a devil or whatever you want to call him, one thing for myself I can't deny is that there has been real cases of demonic possession. And so there is an evil on the other side that is willing to take over your body, is willing to just really put people through hell, to say it lightly. I mean, I know of a couple of cases that were absolutely real. The woman wasn't nuts. She wasn't losing her mind. She wasn't on any crazy drugs. There was demonic activity in her home, and she had become possessed. And so you got to wonder, if you don't believe in a devil, you got to believe in that evil, because these things come from somewhere.
Well, just look at the evil that these men are perpetrating. The men in power, it's far greater and far more sophisticated than you would think that any human being could have. And the plan that they have is so the plan for world enslavement is so multifaceted, every front: education, the monetary system, the political system, the television, the brainwashing, mind control. All of this is such a highly complex system that you could say, well, yeah, these men were brilliant. But these men, again, they openly tell you that they worship Satan as their God. This is their declaration in their landmark book, Morals and Dogma, by Albert Pike. And Albert Pike was the grand sovereign commander of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry back in the 19th century. And they all follow that. And Skull and Bones Society, secret society, is an American branch of Freemasonry. So Skull and Bones is basically subservient to all of the principles and teachings of Albert Pike in his book, Morals and Dogma. In that book, they state, we worship Satan as God. They call him Lucifer, but that's a nice name for Satan, which means the adversary in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Well, we know they exist, and if there's a Satan, then there's a God too. We could go on and on with the theology, but that's all related to Planet X. I'm quite sure. For example, the comets that cause we could get into the physics of what a comet does and how it caused these natural disasters on Earth. That's recorded in the book of Exodus, and we could see that the comets were actually stated in the Bible as being angels of God. That's kind of hard to understand, but there's a supernatural transformation there where an angel actually becomes a comet or Planet X. And the physical effects are the electrical discharge. The comets are engulfed in plasma. This plasma is nothing more than hydrogen ions, positive, electrically positive charged hydrogen ions, which encircle the entire vast outer sphere of our solar system. And when these comets come in from deep space, they become saturated with this plasma as they enter into that big plasma bubble. And it's a electrically sticky bubble, just like a bee. Imagine a bee flying into a huge bubblegum bubble.
Yeah.
The bee is going to pick up all that, be engulfed with bubblegum and pull a long bubblegum tail behind it. And as the bee flies deeper and deeper toward the center of that huge bubble, what's happening is that band and pull it real tight, and stretch it way out and release it, or if it breaks, it will sort of ripple very, very, rapidly in a fraction of a second. Well, that's an analogy that pretty closely defines what happens to these electrified plasma saturated comets as they pass into our solar system. And they've been observed as these ripply, dragon-like, roller coaster-like red objects in the sky. Some of the accounts given by ancient historians, as I recall, are something like it looked like a red, fiery coil, in the sky with a tail that was, spiraling like a coil. And the Chinese cultures from ancient Chinese cultures recorded it as a serpent in the sky. And when you see the Chinese New Year's every year, they do the dragon dance. That dragon dance is a legend, actually a saga in choreography, in dance choreography, telling the story of what the ancient Chinese civilizations witnessed when this comet came in. The dragon is a long tunnel-like fabric that men get into, and they follow in a long trail in a single file behind one another, and they pop up and down to represent a pictorial display of a roller coaster like spiraling dragon in the sky. So there you have history or legends being recited or being delivered in a dance type choreography. It's amazing. The Thunderbird, for example, the Thunderbird of the American Indians in the Southwest was actually a representation of a comets that came in. This was all the same events when Earth underwent great disasters. These comets are, again, plasma-drenched objects. When they get close to the sun, they begin to stimulate the sun electrically because they're positively charged, and the sun's space charge surrounding the sun is primarily electrons negatively charged. So the negative and positive begin to interact and attract one another. The sun begins to discharge, and when it does, it flares, and when the sun flares, it blows out these huge solar winds, which shoot out in waves in all directions, striking the comet, the incoming comet, causing the plasma saturated the coma of the comet to stretch out laterally so that you have what looks like a winged globe. And this winged globe has been described in so many ancient cultures. The Hittites, the Babylonians, they all talk about this winged globe. And I even have a doc in Zechariah Sitchin's landmark book, The 12th Planet.
Now, let me ask you this. Could it be, when they talk about this winged planet, I mean, could it possibly have been some huge ship that came, and that's why they claim that Anunnaki? I'm just asking. I don't know.
No, actually, the winged globe, I can show you proof that it is a natural phenomenon of electricity and magnetism. When you look at some of the pictures that have been taken from the Soho satellite, which sits out in space and photographs the sun constantly, you'll see some of these winged globes. It looks like flying saucers that are getting close to the sun. Well, there's that natural phenomenon where the solar winds blowing out, striking the plasma, cause the plasma, because you have an attraction and a attraction between negative and positive. And the electrons, of course, are also in the solar wind, so they would repel. They would attract, whereas some of the protons that are also being blown out would repel the protons from the comet. And the end effect, and James McCanny, I think, has attempted to show how this electrical interaction would cause wings to spread out from the comet. I haven't taken a look at it, but I can analyze it myself and see that how this would happen with the electrical interaction between opposite and like charges, actually, that are both being blown out by the sun, interacting with the comet. So the effect is, and it's been the ancients noticed it, coming over Earth when the comets were really huge. And we're seeing it now with these comets that are crashing or grazing the sun or going close to the sun or crashing into the sun. winged globe was huge in ancient times because it scared those people, civilizations of the world were terrified. And great natural disasters were occurring when these comets, huge comets, came by. We today have never experienced such a flyby of massive comets. If we did, we would have had earthquakes all over the world at the same time, and we would have had electrical discharge. But the ancients did experience the peak of the catastrophe, of the celestial catastrophe, and that's why they worshipped. They literally worshipped this in fear, thinking that it was a god. And of course, God is bringing it in to make people fear. They have the Zechariah Sitchin, I could read from his book, but I'll just paraphrase from his book, The 12th Planet, where he says the ancient civilizations worshipped that symbol. They had that symbol all over their buildings. It was a winged globe, and it was a symbol on cylinder seals, inside temples, everywhere. The archaeologists have been doing digs. They found this winged globe, a great symbol of honor, fear, terror, and worship. And that's what we also take a look at. This is amazing how this symbol has carried over from ancient times even into today. But it's esoteric, it's mysterious, it's not really described. But look at the United States Air Force insignia symbol. That's a winged globe. Look at the Chrysler Corporation, Chrysler logo. That's a winged globe. Look at the Toyota logo on a car when you happen to see a Toyota in front of you. That's a winged globe.
That's true.
You see it in many cases. Well, anyway, that's what we're going to have to look forward to. What we're seeing now in the SOHO satellite, these little winged globes that people think are flying saucers or little spaceships, are really nothing more. It's a natural phenomenon of electricity and magnetism. And that's what happened in the past. That's why they saw the Thunderbird. Zechariah Sitchin has numerous drawings. One drawing from each of the civilizations that witnessed it. Now, the drawings all had something in common. They all looked like an eagle, sort of like an eagle flying straight toward you, if you can visualize that, coming right at you with the wings outstretched and the head appearing in the center as a circular object. And there were variations on it. Some of the civilizations drew their winged globe with feet coming down from it, the feet of the bird. That's the Thunderbird. And the reason the feet occur is because when the comet gets close enough to planet Earth is electrical ground or electrically neutral. Earth is a great source of electrons. We know, we've all heard the term Earth ground. And that's why they ground electrical systems deep into the ground, because the Earth is a copious source of electrons. Well, these protons are positive, the protons that saturate the incoming comet. And when the comet gets close enough, proximity is the main factor in causing an electrical discharge between two oppositely charged objects, proximity. So when they get close enough, that's when the discharging occurs. So now the winged globe is not only a winged globe, but a winged globe with a long vertical column discharging down to the Earth, causing destruction as it discharges like a welder's torch. And that then becomes a cross, right? Huge, red, glowing cross in the sky. And this is what Jesus prophesied, that you will see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Now, what's the sign of the Son of Man? What's the sign of Jesus? Everybody knows really what it is. It's a cross. And he's telling us that we're going to see a cross in the sky coming with great power and glory.
And it's funny. I was just looking before the show. Somebody had sent me pictures, and it showed a comet coming in. And the comet, they actually outlined it, and it was shaped like a cross.
Yeah, I mean, it's known to be a winged globe for sure. As it gets closer to the sun, the wings, the outstretched arms of the Savior on the cross, or the wings on that globe, will become more and more prominent as it gets closer to the sun, because you have it. Again, proximity is the most important factor in electrical interaction between opposite charges and between like charges. So that's why the wings spread out more and more. Incidentally, if you go to the book of Exodus, this is really amazing. In the book of Exodus, God tells Moses that I'm going to send a destroyer over tonight, passing over. That's how the term Passover came about. I'm going to send a destroyer, and he will pass over you and not destroy you, yet he will destroy for those in Egypt who
You're
failed to take the warning.
you're a little low, John. If you can, I don't know if
Oh,
you. There you
okay.
are. There you
Did
are.
you check your volume? Because I seem to be shouting into the phone. I hope you set your volume okay.
Oh yeah, actually I have. I've actually got it turned up a bit
Oh,
because I don't know
okay.
if you might be moving the phone just away from your mouth a little bit. I don't know, but you
Oh,
sound good
okay.
now.
Thanks for telling me.
Thank you.
They were told by God. God told Moses to tell your people to take the sacrificial lamb, which is a symbolic representation of the coming Jesus, the sacrifice for sin for all mankind. Take that sacrificial lamb, kill the lamb, take the blood from the lamb, and this is for the ancient Israelites now. This is a Jewish holiday, not just Jewish, but Israelite holiday. And take the blood from the lamb and stroke it on the doors of your houses, of the Israelites' slaves' houses. Put one stroke of blood across the left side of the door, another stroke of blood across the right side of the door, and another stroke of blood on top of the door. And that symbolizes the wings, the two side wings, and the head of the globe. And when that destroyer passes over, God told Moses, your house will be protected. This destroyer will pass over you without damaging you. And God told Moses that this shall be a holiday or memorial for your people forevermore. Tell this to generation after generation. That's why we have the Passover every April. Well, anyway, getting back to the science behind it, the U.S. government acknowledged discovering this huge planet, and this was an article in the New York Times. I'm not going to go into it, except maybe to read a few brief passages. But think about this. 31 years ago, there's an article from the New York Times, January 30th, 1983. The title was Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X by John Noble Wilford. And I'll just read the first paragraph.
Okay.
Something out there beyond the farthest reaches of the known solar system seems to be tugging at Uranus and Neptune. Some gravitational force keeps perturbing the two giant planets, causing irregularities in their orbits. The force suggests a presence far away and unseen, a large object that may be the long-sought Planet X. So they're saying that it's been sought for a long time. And I'll abbreviate the article by saying that the reason it was sought for a long time was that ever since the early 1800s, even the astronomers then, like 200 years ago, noticed that the outer planets Uranus and Neptune had perturbations in their orbital travel. That is, a little jog or dip or excursion out of their normal orbit that was irregular. There was no reason why that would happen in terms of the physics of motion, except that some gravitational body was out there, and in that particular place beyond their orbit, whenever that planet went around, made a huge circle around the sun in its revolution, it would be pulled out of its orbit by the rather close proximity of this huge body. And then it would return, after it passed by this huge body, it would return back to its normal orbital path. So the orbit then would be perturbed or stretched out a little bit at one particular point in irregularity in its circular motion. Okay, am I speaking loud enough? I hope so.
Oh yeah, you're doing
okay.
Fine.
And this is how they knew, going back 200 years, the 1830s, they noticed this. So that's why the article says this has been long sought Planet X. They didn't see it, but they saw its gravitational effects, and they figured this thing must be huge, must be so great, because, the larger a body, the stronger its gravitational pull. And this object must have been way, way out there, but yet, even though it was a great distance out, like a magnet, like a powerful magnet, you can move it far away from a ball bearing. But if the magnet is strong enough, it'll cause that ball bearing to roll toward the magnet. So if the stronger the magnet, or the larger the gravitational body, the greater its ability to attract another object at a great distance away. So that's what they knew. They knew this thing was huge, and they even began to look for it in the early 1900s, 1910. A famous astronomer named Percival Lowell constructed the Lowell Observatory in Arizona, and just to look, dedicated solely to look for Planet X. And that's how the name Planet X came about. It was given to it by the famous astronomer Percival Lowell in the early 1900s. And then the government, NASA, began looking for it. They had a secret document titled The Search for Planet X. This was in the late 70s.
And is there a way, not to interrupt, but I'm curious, is there a way to get one's hands on that document still today?
I think that's on the internet. I know James McCanney mentioned that NASA has an internal document. Of course, it's supposed to be secret, but somehow it got on the internet. And I have James McCanney on tape for going back 12 years or so, where he mentioned on a radio show that, yeah, the government NASA has an internal document titled The Search for Planet X. And so they know it exists. Don't let them tell you that it doesn't, because they're lying. They've been searching for it themselves secretly. They sent up and this is well known too, I bet the New York Times article, where they sent up the Pioneer 10 and 11 space probes. I've had the article right in front of me, but for the sake of saving time, I mean, these are actual photocopies of the New York Times articles that I'm reading to you. So if anybody wants to see the proof that I'm paraphrasing, it's right. I can send you pictures, clear pictures of the actual New York Times article, 1982, 1983. The 1982 New York Times stated that they sent up the Pioneer 10 and 11 space probe. The Pioneer 10 is really the one that they were looking at. And that was designed to go close to where they had calculated this object was, Planet X was located, close to it, hoping that when it got close enough that this Pioneer 10 space probe would be gravitationally pulled off of its trajectory as it passed the point where they calculated this Planet X was located. If it was pulled off its trajectory, that would prove that this huge gravitational body was there pulling the Pioneer 10 space probe off its trajectory. And sure enough, it did. I cannot find, or I haven't really searched out the proof that it actually was pulled off of its trajectory, but all the researchers tell us that it was, and they were satisfied with it. And in fact, I think now that I realize there is proof in the fact that NASA sent up more space telescopes to further verify what the Pioneer 10 had already verified, that indeed its trajectory had been pulled slightly, deviated slightly by the gravitational pull of Planet X. And the following year, after 1982, 79 was the year. 1979 was the year they sent up the Pioneer 10 space probe. It took a few years to get way, way out there beyond Pluto, and where Planet X was located, and get pulled off of its trajectory. And in 1983, they sent up the infrared astronomical satellite. That's what this New York Times article is talking about. It focuses on the infrared astronomical satellite. In fact, this January 1983 New York Times article that I'm holding in my hand has a picture of the infrared astronomical satellite. It says U.S., as I'm reading here, U.S. and Dutch technicians are preparing the infrared astronomical satellite before its launch last week. This is from United Press International. And last week was the week before the article was written, which was January 30th. So it was launched in January of 1983. Then it went up and it did all of this infrared telescope orbited around the pole, the south pole of planet Earth, way, way up above the clouds where there was no obstacles, no obstruction to its view. And it was infrared specifically because this object, being a brown dwarf, what they believe to be a brown dwarf star, does not emit visible light. It emits only infrared light. It's a slow, smoldering brown dwarf star, a star that not a baby star. It didn't quite get big enough to light up like and ignite like our sun. It's a huge adult star, but this is a baby star. And those brown dwarf stars are quite common in the universe. This one, they emit only infrared light because they're not large enough to go into nuclear fusion and emit various wavelengths, the entire spectrum of light, just the infrared. So that's what the infrared astronomical satellite was designed to do. And indeed, that infrared satellite did spot, sight, and photograph Planet X. I've got the article in front of me. After the New York Times, the January 1983 New York Times article heralded the launch of the infrared astronomical satellite, 11 months later, 11 months after January 1983, in December, 1983, the Washington Post front page article heralded the discovery of Planet X, but then they didn't go with Planet X. They just said, "Wow, we found this huge body." And I'll read you the article, the actual article that I photocopied from the microfilm archives at my county library. Front page, Washington Post, December 30th, 1983. Article titled, "Possibly as Large as Jupiter, a Mystery Heavenly Body Discovered," by Thomas O'Toole, Washington Post staff writer. Quote, "A heavenly body, possibly as large as the giant planet Jupiter, and possibly so close to Earth that it would be part of this solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite." Now here's where they're told by our wonderful domineering National Security Agency, which controls, the NSA controls all of the government agencies, even the CIA they control. Here's where they were told to sort of cover up some of the details because they didn't want to panic the people. They say, "So mysterious is this object that astronomers do not know if it is a planet, a giant comet, a nearby protostar," a protostar would be a star that's beginning to form, "that never got hot enough to become a star. They don't know whether it's a distant galaxy so young that it's still in the process of forming its first stars, or a galaxy so shrouded in dust that none of the light cast by its stars ever gets through." See, this is all a bunch of nonsense that they added in there to cover up the fact that if they know what it is, they dedicated the infrared astronomical satellite to finding Planet X, the brown dwarf, which they call the brown dwarf star, in January, and now they're lying about something that they publicly announced to the world in the New York Times 11 months earlier. And they must think we're really stupid.
Yeah, and I have no doubt that they were looking for it, and I know about these articles that came out in the newspaper about them finding it. Now, has anybody confronted them with these articles and said, "Well, then what the hell is this?" If you don't know what we're talking about.
If you ever did, they would never respond. That's guaranteed. But we're bringing truth out. I'm bringing it out. Mark Hazelwood brought it out in his book, Blindsided, about 13 years ago. Of course, Mark did not have the actual photocopies of the articles. He just had transcripts of them. But he said, yeah, they lied about it. And they try to say, "Oh, we don't know what this thing is." But actually, if the National Security Agency had really been on their toes and alert, they would have said, "Don't even report it at all. Do not mention this thing at all." Well, they got by them. At that time, they were not that quite alert to it, and the Washington Post put the information out. Why? Because NASA was really pleased. The scientists at NASA were thrilled. This was a great discovery, and they wanted to tell the world about it. Of course, they were just scientists trying to be honest, but they didn't know that there was a power elite controlling them and were lying to the people.
Quick.
So they had to obey their ruler, their non-scientific evil rulers. And we know the NSA is evil. We see what they're doing today.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, John, let's take a break. This is a good spot to stop for a minute, take a break, and we'll late night in the Midlands, no spaces. And if you're listening on the Dark Matter Radio Network, again, it's recorded for you, so don't call in. And John, well, we're back, and I am fascinated, and I haven't given it a whole lot of thought, but when you bring up this newspaper article, that it is very real. There was other ones too, wasn't there? Other articles that came out before they hushed everybody up?
Yes, the subject was made taboo and forbidden by the National Security Agency back in 1983 after the New York Times heralded the discovery of this object. But a couple of articles did slip out, and then nothing was said afterward that I can find, perhaps in some other publications, but it's been essentially kept secret for 31 years. Now, there's proof right there. Just think about this. The largest object, and I'm going to tell you how of magnitude of this discovery is the greatest astronomical discovery in the history, the modern history of the world. And to show you how important and paramount this discovery is, I'll just read a little bit more of the landmark Washington Post front page article, December 30th, 1983, which I just began to read. And it goes on to say that, quote, the most fascinating explanation of this mystery body, which is so cold that it casts no light, and that's why they need an infrared telescope, so cold that it casts no light, the explanation of what it is has never been seen by optical telescopes on Earth or in space. Their most, I'm cutting in with my own commentary here, is that the explanation is that it is a giant gaseous planet. This is all quotes from the article. A giant gaseous planet as large as Jupiter and as close to Earth as 50 billion miles. While that may seem like a great distance in earthbound terms, it is a stone's throw in cosmological terms. So close, in fact, that it would be the nearest heavenly body to Earth beyond the outermost planet Pluto. If it is really that close, it would be a part of our solar system, said Dr. James Houck, H-O-U-C-K, of Cornell University Center for Radiophysics. So they're saying this object is so close that it's actually considered to be a part of our solar system. Now here you have an object. We know that Jupiter is the giant of our solar system by a large degree. And yet this object is a brown dwarf star, which is defined as being, brown dwarf stars are larger than Jupiter.
Yeah,
so
and
this object would have to be, it's so close it would have to be a member of our solar system. That's how important, astronomically important, this object is.
And why so cold?
Now, what is the mass? What is the magnitude of the gravitational pull of our sun? It's tremendous. It's hard to even visualize how great the gravitational pull of our sun is. But I'll tell you what the mass is estimated as. Nearly 1/3 of a million Earths. That's the mass of our sun. Not that our sun is as dense as our Earth, but it is so large that its total mass throughout its entire huge volume, its total mass is equal to the mass of 1/3 of a million Earths. So you can imagine with a mass that great as our sun has, the sun would be a tremendous gravitational magnet, so to speak, pulling objects around it. And the reason it doesn't pull Mercury into it, Mercury doesn't crash into the sun, the reason that Venus doesn't crash into the sun, and the reason Earth and all the other planets do not crash into the sun is that there's a counterbalancing force, a centrifugal, the word fugal being derived from the word fugitive or fleeing from the center force, centrifugal force, which we experience that centrifugal force when we make a left turn in our cars. We tend to slide to the right, or when we make a right turn, we tend to slide to the left. Well, that's the centrifugal force that counteracts the centripetal or center-seeking force, center-pulling force that the sun exerts on the planet. So when those two forces, the centripetal force on the orbiting planet is counterbalanced by the centrifugal force of that orbiting planet, then the planet remains at a fixed distance orbiting the sun. Otherwise, it will get pulled in. But take an object that happens to be passing by or being pulled in by the sun. It's not on a circular orbit. It's on maybe an elliptical orbit, which is pretty much approximates a straight line in some sections because it's such a long stretched elliptical orbit. Now it cannot revolve around the sun. Therefore, it must come zooming in toward the sun, and that's where the great danger is. It's like you have these, if you were to have runners on a track, Olympic runners, and you had a series of concentric tracks, one track within another, where all the runners are on their own track and they are safely passing one another without colliding into one another, because each one has a separate orbital track, just like our planets have their separate orbital paths. However, imagine an intruder, a bystander, who would come running through the tracks, racing toward the center of those tracks. He could be a great danger to the other runners, colliding with them, knocking them over. Well, in this case, the planets are so far apart that it's unlikely that there will be a collision. However, as this object passes by, even though it doesn't hit Earth, its gravitational and magnetic forces are so strong that those gravitational magnetic forces pull and massage the crustal skin of planet Earth on which we live, and pull and massage the underlying flesh, so to speak, of planet Earth, which is the magma mantle beneath the Earth. And that's why the Earth becomes deformed and mountains have been formed. We can see the evidence quite clearly in mountain building that has occurred throughout the ages as a result of this passing object coming in.
And I'm a little curious here. Like you had mentioned that Jupiter is really close to being a brown dwarf star. So if that's the case, I mean, what determines what a moon is and what's not? Because now Jupiter has how many moons orbiting around of it? I mean, could any of those actually be planets?
Yes, that's possible. I mean, it is. I'm not much. I haven't studied that quite deeply enough. And even the scientists, astronomers, astrophysicists don't know if there's some form of life on Jupiter's moons, Ganymede, Io, Callisto, and Titan, is it, or Tycho? One of those moons could have life on it because they could be solid objects like Earth. They could be gaining heat energy and some form of minimal light energy from Jupiter, which would be their sun. And it's possible. I don't know for sure, but it's an interesting consideration. Anytime you have a brown dwarf star, or better yet, an adult star with planets orbiting around it, there's a possibility of life on those planets.
Yeah, I mean, because they lie to us about so much, and that's why when people say, oh, no, there's definitely not life here or there, I say, well, if we're going to agree that we've been lied to, we have to also agree that we could have been lied to about everything. So who's to say that there's not planets orbiting Jupiter or something like that? And I mean, how would we know? We're not up there.
Right. Well, there are planets orbiting Jupiter, and I think they're pretty curious to know if there's life. They look for water. That's the main indication of life.
These crazy weather patterns going on right now. I don't know where you would actually like to start.
Well, weather is a good place to start. I mean, that's some down-to-earth, pardon the pun, evidence of that something is definitely wrong with planet Earth. We see it in all sorts of weather phenomena, weather disasters, extreme cases of snow, heavy snow, record-breaking snow, in fact, and record-breaking cold, particularly in the South, which has never, in our memorable history, experienced such cold weather. The South has been devastated because they never have such cold, icy, snowy weather, and the roads. The proof is that they don't have the salt trucks. They don't have the equipment to deal with this as the northern states do, and that's why the South has been particularly devastated. So there's evidence right there of historic, epic snow, cold, ice, etc. That has never occurred before. It's happening closer and closer to the equator. So Earth is in trouble. We look at floods. We've seen entire nations. I know it's easy to forget some of these disasters because they're not really highly publicized in the mass media. But if you look back, you'll recall that the entire nation of Pakistan was flooded out a few years ago. Virtually the entire nation was flooded out. And the entire nation of Australia, the continent, much of that was flooded out just a few years ago. We had floods all over the United States, and I know that people who live in those regions will never forget them. The epic floods in Texas, when Texas was basically floating away. Washington State, Louisville, Kentucky got flooded out very badly several times. Nashville, Grand Ole Opry was damaged heavily. Floods in every portion of the United States, really.
Oh yeah.
Storms, hurricanes that are huge, massive, large area hurricanes like Irene and Sandy. Typically, hurricanes cover a small area.
Look at the Philippines.
Like a bullet.
Look at the Philippines. What was that? 233 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, I mean over 200 miles an hour. I mean that has never been recorded before. So the weather itself is proving that something is wrong with planet Earth because this has never happened before. We could go on and on. We could talk about, as you say, the winds, I remember, and I followed the Weather Channel quite a bit, homes were so dry that the ground was cracking and the foundations of the houses were being destroyed because the ground was getting so dry, cracking and separating.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. And here we've got we're about to get hit with an ice storm here in Columbia, South Carolina. So they're putting warnings out about power outages, and so preparing for that.
Right, and this is one reason we're seeing the reality of it hit home. We're feeling the pain of it. People in the South are going to have to deal with power outages. People up in where I live in New Jersey may very well have power outages due to the ice buildup on the trees and on the power lines, and then the winds too. So when you have ice buildup and you have winds, that's when power lines come down. And it could be for a long period of time. In fact, the Weather Channel is warning that these power outages may last a long time. So when you feel the pain of it, it's not so easy to dismiss the threat or the reality that Earth is in trouble. It's quite easy to dismiss it when everything is going fine. But when you see the reality of the pain that's hitting us from all these weather disasters, then you begin to realize that, hey, it's time to wake up, time to get in motion, and time to prepare. That's my whole purpose, is trying to get people to prepare. I mean, why would I want to scare people just for the sake of scaring them? People watch horror movies for that reason, to be scared because they enjoy it. But that's not my purpose. That's not our purpose. We want to warn people. We care about people. Care about people protecting their lives and saving their lives. And that's why now they're beginning to realize that, yes, they have to get backup generators. They have to get solar panels. They have to start buying food, canned food. I mean, I've been stocking up, fortunately, before Fukushima's nuclear disaster in Japan, I had stocked up on sardines and salmon. And so that's non-radioactive sardines and salmon, and the dates are still good. Yeah. Still, within the period of freshness where they're not expiring yet. So I was lucky. Same thing with, you can get cans of Vienna sausages, and I have a bunch of those in the basement too, and cans of white meat chicken. Well, that's the kind of the protein that people will need when things start going, and mainly it's the power. When the power goes, that's when the stores get cleaned out, and everything, our fragile infrastructure, our web-like infrastructure of computers and delivery systems, just-in-time delivery systems, becomes disabled, actually. And nothing can be delivered to the stores. I mean, I was just watching the Weather Channel today. They showed a photograph of these huge long supermarket shelves cleaned out just from this one winter storm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, that's what happens here, is as soon as there's any mention of a snow flurry going to be in the air, and good luck finding bread or milk on any shelf.
Right, so that's why now, when there's no disaster, you've got to start buying dried. What I buy is amaranth. Amaranth is a wonderful grain from Peru, ancient grain from Peru, and that happens to be complete protein. You can get bags of dried amaranth. It's sort of like small beads, and not only amaranth, but there's dried millet and dried barley, dried lentils, dried split peas, very low cost, and those can be soaked for a period of time, and they get softened up without heat, partially softened anyway, so you can save fuel by soaking these grains and legumes in water for 12 or 15 hours. That's the kind of thing we have to start planning for. Plus sprouting seeds. I sprout seeds in a big jar. It's very easy to do. The seed sprouts contain all the enzymes that the body needs to break down the foods and to digest them. Our bodies are depleted of enzymes because of our modern day false food that we're eating. So that's why our bodies cannot assimilate the carbohydrates and proteins and fats that we need to in order to keep the body strong and active. So these are all the things we have to start doing.
Yeah, there's so many chemicals that are added to the food. It's ridiculous. I was just talking about this last night with Autumn, and I was telling her, it's like, if you're going to a regular grocery store, practically everything you're getting has got chemicals, preservatives, and all this, processed crap. And then we wonder why there's such an epidemic with cancers and different diseases. It's all this poison that's being put in the food. So I would suggest people to, get as pure as they can of whatever they're going to store, for sure. I mean, naturally, if you're starving, you're not going